Welcome to Viva la Vulva, the podcast that explores and teaches about the goodness of the vulva. Here is your host, Dr. Cara Quant, an internal medicine doctor and advocate for female sexual health.
Thank you for joining me again. My name is Dr. Cara Quant. I'm an internal medicine doctor and advocate for female sexual health. Welcome to April. I can't believe time is going so fast in 2026, but we are already in April, which is wild. So let's just dive right in. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of research. I've been seeing a lot of reports out about the gut microbiome, right? Like we've been told that it's our second brain, that there's so many medicines and things that act on the gut microbiome. To have a good gut microbiome is good and helps with the balance of your body and hormones and different things like that. And when your microbiome is not good, things can go wrong. Well, it's essentially the same thing for the vagina microbiome. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the bacteria and things that are in place within the vagina that help to maintain it and keep it self-cleaning, if you will. So a healthy vaginal microbiome is actually low diversity. She likes to be simple, powerful, but simple. And it's dominated by one or two lactobacillus species. So in doing my research for this episode, there's essentially four main community state types called CST. So there's Lactobacillus crispatus. There is Lactobacillus inners. There are the category of mixed anaerobes. And then there's also Lactobacillus ginsenii. Now, what is the importance of Lactobacillus? Well, what happens is that this particular type of bacteria actually does a few things. So actually does three things. It produces lactic acid, which helps to maintain the pH of the vagina. It produces hydrogen peroxide, which helps to, when hydrogen peroxide is produced, it helps to decrease the amount of bad actors, if you will, in the vagina, so causing BV and different yeast infections and different infections like that. And it, like I said, it maintains a low pH. The vagina actually likes to be at a low pH, anywhere between 3.8 and 4.5. But we'll actually go into a little bit of information about that in a second. So the two big ones of the lactobacilli are the crispatus and the L inners. So it matters because the inners, the lactobacillus inners, is a fair weather friend that essentially can shift to dysbiosis or disharmony within the vagina when under stress. But I was looking at some research from years ago, I would say like 2010, 2012. And race and ethnicity actually does have to do with the different microbiome type within the vagina. So they did research on different ethnicities, including white and black and Hispanic and Asian, and found that there were different compositions of microbiomes within different races. And that actually Black and Hispanic women had higher pH levels, which for some is considered bad and something that we want to avoid. But in their scenario, or in our scenario, it was actually good. And it was a normal thing for our pHs to be a little bit high. With research, especially with women research, there is not a lot of participants within these studies. So I think they had like maybe 80 to 100 participants from each ethnicity, and they were able to get that information, show that there are different compositions of microbiome based on your race, which I feel like is really important. And I'll come back to when we discuss treatment and things that are on the frontier for things to come for vaginitis treatment. So what things are going wrong? Well, women all the time, vulva owners, vagina owners, are having these recurrent vaginal infections, right? Yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis infections. And essentially, this is a problem with dysbiosis, or when I say that, I mean like disharmony with the bacteria that's in the vagina. There's something going on with the microbiome spectrum. And BV, bacterial vaginosis, is not an infection in the classic sense. It's actually a community collapse, essentially. So things like Gardnerella, Prevotella, Mobiluncus, which are all weird sounding, sounds like dinosaurs, bacteria names that can take over and cause these other infections like BV and yeast infections. And if you've heard my podcast before, I do talk about the biofilm. So biofilm is something that can cause BV to recur even after you take antibiotics. So there is a thin layer that is deposited over the vaginal epithelium, or like the wall of the vagina. And even though the BV is cleared, that biofilm can remain and essentially cause a recurrent infection. And so this biofilm persists despite the antibiotics. And that biofilm is on the epithelium. And so what about yeast? The vulvovaginal candidiasis, which is a whole different mechanism, but essentially it's fungal overgrowth. It's not a bacteria. So lactobacillus actually does not protect against it doesn't protect against it in the way that we thought. And then there are also things called aerobic vaginitis. So things like E. coli essentially can affect the vagina and cause infections. And generally this is an underdiagnosed third category. And sometimes we're often told that this is BV. Now, if you go to your doctor, it's actually really helpful when you have symptoms to go to your doctor so a vaginal swab can be done in order to determine what exactly is going on, rather than just getting the treatment thinking that you know what you have. And you know what? There's a lot of symptoms that can overlap. So generally the symptoms for BV are the fishy smelling odor. You maybe have some burning sensation. You have some vaginal discharge. So these are all things that can happen, symptoms that can happen with BV. Generally for yeast infections, there's a lot of itching. There can also be burning sensation. Usually a thick white discharge can happen. There are things like STDs that can happen, or STI, sexually transmitted infections. So gonorrhea and chlamydia, which are oftentimes a little bit different symptoms, or you can actually be asymptomatic. So for women who are dealing with these recurrent episodes of infection, it really is helpful to get the swabs in order to determine exactly what is going on so it can provide the best treatment. And then what happens when you have this abnormal microbiome within the vagina is it can lead to higher susceptibility to STIs, so gonorrhea and chlamydia and trichomonas, which is considered an STI, sexually transmitted infection. It can happen when your microbiome is messed up. And even for women who are pregnant, there are things that can happen like preterm birth. You can have infertility issues with a poor microbiome. And then even also HPV persistence. HPV is the virus that causes things like genital warts as well as cervical cancer and atypical cells on the cervix, essentially. So I do want to bust some myths. I like doing that. And so these are maybe some myths that you've heard about your vaginal microbiome, right? So douching balances your pH. Wrong. It's totally wrong. If you put anything inside the vagina, any type of fluid inside the vagina, it can severely mess up the natural flora that you have in there already. So you don't want to mess up that flora by inserting a fluid in there to quote unquote clean it. And it actually can increase your risk of BV. Yogurt in the vagina works. Also wrong. There's no robust evidence about yogurt working, right? There's like billions of colonies of bacteria in yogurt. But as I spoke about earlier, there are certain types of bacteria that are found within the vagina. And again, it's a low diversity environment. It doesn't want a lot of stuff in it. Different types of colonies of bacteria and lactobacilli in it. So yogurt is not a good thing to use. It has many lactobacilli strains that don't necessarily colonize the vagina. I definitely wouldn't use yogurt in the vagina because, again, there's no robust evidence that it helps. Another myth, if it smells, then you're not clean. There are natural smells to the vagina. It actually also depends on what time of the cycle that you're in. If you are bleeding or just recently bleeding, you'll have like a copper smelling odor. If you are, there are different smells that can happen different times of the month, whether you are ovulating or about to start your period. But that doesn't always mean that there's an infection going on. So if you are concerned, definitely go see a doctor to diagnose you and see if this is an actual infection or if it is just a normal smell that you have. Probiotics you eat can fix vaginal BV. Now this is a little questionable. I mean, even I will prescribe medicines or probiotics for women who have recurrent episodes of BV, but in doing the research, there are different time frames of the good bacteria getting into the vagina. There can be something called translocation from like the gut to the vagina, which usually takes a lot longer than putting something within the vagina. So I feel like the research is still out about whether taking a probiotic is good versus putting it inside the vagina could be more helpful. And boric acid is a home remedy. So this is actually true. It can help. It actually is a legitimate adjunctive therapy that I also recommend with patients who have recurrent episodes of BV. But I'll give you more details about that in a bit. Boric acid is good. This is definitely not something that should be ingested. It actually can kill you if it's ingested and be really dangerous if it's ingested, but it's only a medicine that is put within the vagina. But again, the context matters as to like when and at what time to use boric acid. It's not a end-all, be-all medicine. And boric acid, as I discussed earlier, can help with the pH. Again, vaginas generally want to be at a lowish pH level, so it can maintain that good microbiome within the vagina. Thanks for joining me today on the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host and internal medicine physician, Dr. Cara Quant. If you like this podcast, please let others know and subscribe. Also, if you want to hear more information about what's happening with Viva La Vulva, hop over to our website at vivalavulvala.org and sign up for our newsletter.